In this video, we want to look at reference angles. And reference angles are going to help us to understand the unit circle and evaluating trig functions better. So, what is a reference angle? A reference angle is an acute positive angle formed with the x-axis. The important thing here is it's always with the x-axis. For everything we do, really the rest of this year, we really always want to try to form angles with the x-axis. Is it possible to do other things? You can get around stuff, but to make everything the same, everybody's doing it the same, we always want to form them with the x-axis. So it's an acute positive angle formed with the x-axis. So let's say we have an angle that is in the second quadrant, right? This is our angle, theta. Our reference angle, which I am going to call here in this diagram like theta prime, it's related to theta, but it's different. Our reference angle is going to be this acute less than 90, remember acute means less than 90, angle with the x-axis. If we have an angle in the third quadrant, this would be our angle theta. Our reference angle is this acute angle with the x-axis. If we have an angle in the fourth quadrant, like that, our reference angle is this acute angle right there. Now, you may be wondering, what about the other quadrant? We have the first quadrant. Why don't we have a reference angle in the first quadrant? Well, if you're in the first quadrant, this angle here, theta, is your reference angle. We only have reference angles when we're not in the first quadrant. Now, let's talk about how we find the reference angle. Well, if you know this angle here, to find your reference angle, you're just going to take pi 180 minus your angle. Because these two angles together add up to pi, so you just subtract to find that. In this case over here, now your angle is bigger than pi, so you are going to take your angle minus pi, and that will give you your reference angle. Over here, this is your angle. All the way around is 2 pi, so you're going to take, to find your reference angle, you're going to take 2 pi minus your angle. So it's all based on coming off pi or 2 pi because it's the angle to the x-axis. Let's look at an example. So to start off, let's just look at the 100. Let's find what is the reference angle for 100, and then we'll talk about the sign. So start off, going to draw a picture. 100 degrees is right here. There's my reference angle. That's my angle, excuse me. My reference angle is going to be the positive acute angle to the x-axis, which is right there, which is going to be 80. Okay, so that is my reference angle, and it doesn't make a difference if I am looking at sine, cosine, or tangent. My next problem is going to be what's cosine. Doesn't matter which one I'm looking at, I have the same reference angle of 80. Now, as we think about the unit circle, and I really am going to stress, draw pictures as you do these. So if I consider sine of 100, right? Here is my sine of 100. Right there, my sine of 100 is the y coordinate. Now consider my reference angle of 80 is right here. And I can see from that right there that those two angles, 100 and 80, have the same sine. So if I write sine of 100 in terms of its reference angle, it's just going to be the sine of 80. And that is my answer. Now, let's consider cosine of 100. So once again, draw my unit circle. Doesn't have to be a great unit circle. Here is 100. It's my x-coordinate. My reference angle is 80, is over here. It's my x-coordinate. And you will see these are not the same. Sign-wise, S-I-G-N. They are the same number. So if I want to write cosine of 100 in terms of its reference angle, in terms of its reference angle is cosine of 80, but the sign is different, S-I-G-N. So in terms of my reference angle, I have to put a negative in front. Let's look at another one. Cosine of 290. So first, we want to draw where is cosine of 290. So 290 is right here. I want to find my reference angle. This is my reference angle, which is 360 minus 290. That is 70 is my reference angle. So my reference angle is up here. So as I consider the cosine of 290 compared to the cosine of 70, there's really only two things we're going to have. Either they're going to be equal, or the sign is going to be different and you got to put a negative down. So in this case, if I look at these two, and I have this point and this point, cosine is the x-coordinate, so I'd say, well, the x-coordinate right there, those are equal. So sine of 290 is equal to cosine of 70. But let's say we had sine. So for same angle, 290 is here, 70 is there. So I'm considering sine of 290 compared to sine of 70. But sine is the y-coordinate. So the y-coordinate of 290 is down here. The sine of 70, the y-coordinate is up here, so those are opposite. Sine of 290 is negative, sine of 70 is positive. So how do I write 290 in terms of its reference angle? It is minus the sine of 70. So that is how we do our reference angles. Now, all that this gets harder is just depending on where your angle is. So where is cosine of negative 40? Cosine of negative 40 is right here. That means my reference angle is 40. Cosine of 40 is back here. So if I consider these 2 points, what do I know about their x-coordinates? Well, the cosine of 40 has a positive x-coordinate. The cosine of negative 140 is negative. So if I want to write cosine of negative 140 in terms of its reference angle, I get that. The last thing we're going to talk about in this section is just to go over how to evaluate trig functions on the calculator. We really haven't talked about this a ton, but we do want to mention it. Just once again, remember, if you're evaluating trig functions on the calculator, you have to make sure, are you in radians or are you in degrees, going back and forth, so that if you have the sine of 100 degrees, you need to make sure your calculator's in degrees. If you have the cosine of 7.24, you have to make sure you're in radians. And if you remember, one way to do this is to leave your calculator in radians. And then if you want to do sine of 100, you can go in and tell it with the angle to make it sine of 100 degrees. And gives you the right answer, even though my mode is in radians. Now that we understand the unit circle, if you think of sine of 100, you can kind of like estimate, are you doing this correctly or not? Or do you have this wrong? Because think about it. If you have the sine of 100, there's the unit circle, 100 is there, so your sine is the y-coordinate, it should be somewhere in there. You're thinking, okay, this should be close to 1. If I type this into my calculator and I had my mode wrong, and I get negative 0.5, you can think that doesn't make sense. My sine of 100, my y coordinate right there, should be positive. The fact I got negative should tell me, hey, I put something in the calculator wrong. My mode is wrong. So once again, just reiterating, as you do stuff in the calculator, make sure you have the right mode. All right, you are now able to do the homework 5.3, reference angles.